Hello, all. Welcome back to another episode of Community That. In this video series, we are uncovering and talking about different community topics with top community experts and leaders across the globe. So, in this line, we have today Avani, who has more than a decade of experience on communities. Hi, Avani. Thanks for joining us today. And I think we are going to talk about why run a community and why not. It's an interesting topic. Avni, very glad to have you here. Why don't you introduce yourself and also tell how you got connected with communities? That'll be really interesting to start with.
Thanks, Om. Hi, everybody. I'm Avni. As Om said, I have over a decade of experience. The truth of the matter, it's probably over 20 years. An old school community head, starting from women's self-help groups, from NGOs, where I sort of started my career in the international development sector. So I am sort of an old community head from the very traditional style of in real life communities where you would go into the field with an NGO and bring people together in a community meeting and make decisions about what are the improvements we want to see in the community, what problems are we facing. And it sort of really taught me that great change can come when people come together. I mean, we can sit in our houses and complain. We can think inside of our minds. We can talk to our families. But when you bring everyone together and you start to find commonalities and experience, it changes the game, right? You can actually effect a great amount of change that way. And so that really inspired me to sort of really believe in community. Especially if you know about microfinance and microcredit and self-help groups, communities have really transformed themselves. Just that simple meeting of women coming together and saving and lending to each other could oftentimes bring electricity to a village. So, when they didn't have any resources, water, electricity, proper rations. So that was really inspiring. And then, obviously times changed and we moved into an age of digital community and started dabbling in Facebook groups. Started a social entrepreneurship meetup in New Delhi. So we had an in real life event that we were doing, my friends and I, where we were bringing social entrepreneurs together. And then we also had a Facebook group alongside that. So I'd like to explore the nexus of what can we do in digital space and how does that need to be concretized in real life to make real and deep and lasting connections. So a lot of my career was in that. And then I dabbled in a couple of startups of my own. I had a counseling platform called Love Doctor, which was also very community-based. So it was a community-based business before we even called the businesses community-based. And it was bringing young people together to talk anonymously about sex and relationships, which was all super taboo. Now everyone's talking about it, which is so awesome, and talking about it in community space and on social media. But back then, I sort of hacked WhatsApp or Jugarified WhatsApp by using the broadcast feature. And I would talk out using a broadcast function and have people reply individually to make it an anonymous community, and then disaggregate all of the things that they said and send it back out. So they could preserve their identity, only myself and my admins of the community knew. But we talked like that every single day, asking questions, getting opinions, talking about facts about the body, what's a healthy relationship, all of that. So that was a lot of fun. And then moved into a digital community platform called Sheroes, which is women's, it's basically the internet for women, where women can bring their whole lives, and there's lots of different communities they can join. And that company has gone on to do lending for women and start other offshoots, work with women entrepreneurs. They're doing all kinds of really cool stuff. And then I went to Meta. So I went straight to big tech, which is very, very probably strange for somebody like me and my personality, but it was so eye-opening to work with a platform that was building communities for the world and really believed in the power of community. And now I'm back in India. So I sort of went to Singapore, went to San Francisco, and I'm back in India and really exploring what is the intersection of all that, right? How do you combine tech with what I learned about building empathetic communities with this
Mhm.
post-pandemic need for us to come back together for real, because we've been looking at each other like this, like, Omnath, if I see you, the first thing I'm going to do is give you a hug. But unfortunately, we've never met. And so I really crave for those experiences, and a lot of people around me have said that too. So that's what I'm exploring now, all those dots connecting in my life and figuring out how do communities, partnerships, in real life experiences connect to the deep longing that humans feel because we're living in an era of loneliness. So here I am today, and now I'm talking to you.
Great, great, Avani. That's like incredible experience. And you also kind of lined out what the community is, right? It's all about human connections, right?
Yeah.
I think it's good to be here. We are going to discuss more on it. So yeah, I think communities are becoming more important these days. A lot of people, brands, creators, any individuals or any entities are looking to build and run their own communities, right? So tell us, like, why should someone run a community? What are the benefits they'd be able to uncover, right?
There's so many benefits to running a community. Based on my background, which is sort of a lot of social science, international, development type things, for me, when you bring people together, you can effect such enormous and great change. Now, coming from the perspective of the people that might be listening to this podcast, change could mean making your product better, or making your business better, or improving your business outcomes. For me, oftentimes it meant changing the world, making a physical place better for everyone, and improving health outcomes, societal outcomes, gender outcomes, uh, income outcomes
Mm-hmm.
for everyone, general well-being outcomes. So I think you can only do that when people come together. Nothing really effective can happen in silos. And so as a business or company or organization, when you bring your folks together, a couple of really powerful things can happen. One is, we often think of a user experience journey as very individualized, but we are
Mm-hmm.
societal creatures. And so you have to think of a societal user journey. What happens when people interact together, talk about your product, share with each other? Because even if you're not creating that space, they're doing that somewhere. So why not own the space, right? So I think first is just like owning the space and being a part of an existing conversation. That is really, really important for you as someone who's trying to grow something. So making some assumptions here about the people that are listening. I think secondly, why community? Because everything is getting impersonal these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we go through automated flows. We're talking to bots. We're talking to IVRs. It's very real to get human to human connection. And I find that, what I stated earlier about the age of loneliness, that there's really this pandemic of loneliness going around the world, right? The UK has a minister of loneliness. Other countries are following suit. I see that all the time when I'm on internet forums, like specifically, I live in Bangalore. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big Reddit user, and the Bangalore subreddit has posts about people feeling lonely all the time. So connecting people over something that they have in common is actually providing like a really great human service to them. And so I think it's even more important to make the experience of your business, your organization, your platform human for people, because inherently we cringe. We don't want to talk to robots. We don't want to just be a number. We have a need to feel special. So I think that's the second thing, right? So thirdly, I think that if you play your cards right, it can improve so many of the outcomes that you're trying to achieve if you build the community for that. If you go in and just randomly build a community, it's not going to do that.
Right.
But let's say that you're thinking about acquiring new users,
Mm-hmm.
and you either create or you play in a space where the types of people that you're trying to access are there, then you can actually bring people onward by a good community player, or by creating a community space, and it's converting people from free to paid. It's finding feedback on your products and service. It's actually providing customer service in those spaces, or it's just giving people a place where they can connect and feel more deeply in a place that's branded under your company or organization. So I think all those things apply. Those would be my top ones. But for me, community is a hard space. So
Right.
I have a lot of reasons why, a lot of spicy takes on why not community. So I'm excited to talk about that too. But these are really good reasons why community is important. And I'll say this, you don't always have to build the space, but you need to play in the playgrounds where your children are at, right? Like you're not going to be a mom or dad and send your children off into the world without a little bit of supervision. And so knowing where people are playing and being able to be a part of that conversation is important, even if it's not your space. So I'll leave you with that spicy take from me.
Very interesting take on why someone needs to run a community, right? I think that covers the first part of our whole discussion, right? Let's get into also why not, right? Why not should someone run a community? Should not run a community, right? Uh, is community something that's not going to suit everyone?
Yeah,
And
I think community doesn't suit everyone. And I'll tell you who it doesn't suit. Um, you and I are both people with community building skills. They're a hard skill set. We've either gained experience and learned how to do this, or we've studied and learned how to do this, or got a certification, or learned from experts. If you are not willing to put some expertise around this
Mhm.
and or teach yourself the mechanics of community building, don't build your own community. I think that's why not community. And I think a lot of people go into community really casually. That's okay. But understand that you have very few opportunities to waste somebody's time with a bad experience. So
Mhm.
you need to be sure of the risk assessment. If I go into this slightly experimentally, not being sure if I want to commit resources to this, and people have a bad experience because it's not active, or the questions aren't getting answered, or it feels dull, or they end up feeling more lonely, which can happen in community, then I would say, why not community? Don't do it. It's not worth it. You can go and play in other people's sandboxes. I think secondly, it is so important to, in addition to putting real resources around it, it's so important to understand what outcomes you're trying to drive. If you're building and you don't have a very clear outcome that's aligned to a business goal or an organization goal or a societal change metric, you don't have a really clear sense of what you're tracking,
Right.
then it's not important. For everything that we build as builders, you're trying to move something from A to B, typically, right? You're trying to enforce some type of change. You
Mhm.
need to understand what the vector of that change is. What is the metric you're going to use to track that change? What's the pre and post? So I think if you're not going to use a very data-driven approach to building community, or have some sort of idea around what you can track and how you're going to transform people to make them better, don't build. It doesn't make sense. You can interact in community in another way. I think thirdly, I will say this based on a personal experience. I started a community in the pandemic that was for lightweight mental and emotional health support. Okay, so we
Okay.
didn't have any professionals in the community, like professional psychologists. Later we brought
Uh,
them. But what ended up happening is it was a space for mainly my network, my friends' network, their friends. And it got promoted by Meta. And tons and tons of people started joining the community. So we grew too fast. And we didn't really have a way to address the needs once it grew so fast. We had to get admins, moderators, all that stuff. We had to ramp up really quickly. But the mood of the community changed. And I think in accepting that growth, we didn't curate really well for the type of community that it was. It was positioned as a community for mental health support. And the types of queries and posts we were getting were people who needed medication. They needed hospitalization, they needed medication, they were thinking about committing suicide. So I think like, don't do community if you can't ruthlessly curate the types of people in a trade-off for growth. And I posted something very angrily on LinkedIn about this yesterday. It's very tempting sometimes when we're growing businesses and organizations to let everyone in. And I think it's a good reason if you feel so pressured to grow, gets listened to, everyone feels served, then it's a reason not to do community right now. So the two aspects of that are either not doing it or making sure that if you've already started and you can't stop, making sure that you curate enough so that you can handle the load. And just think about that. What would I do if we had 10,000 new people coming in overnight, which is what happened to me. Thinking through that is super, super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is very neatly put up, right? So I think there has to be a clear plan, a clear objective of why. Again, it boils down to the first part, why you need to run a community, right? And then also have some clear process in place, which is going to kind of support and give value to the people or the members of the community. I think that is very, very important, right? Again, like now, it also kind of comes down to this, right? So what are some of the common objectives that you have seen where people start building communities, right? What are the common objectives or what are the common metrics they kind of target? What are they looking to achieve?
Yeah, I think mainly most of the common ones I think are around growth and retention. It typically tends to fall into that bucket. I think the third one very broadly is around owning the conversation and that marketing share of voice that we think about. So, around growth, you can look at new members, you can look at conversions, you can look at all of that kind of stuff like growth in revenue, you can kind of stuff. I mean, even like affiliate deal. There's so many things to look at. Among retention, you could really look at change over time. How are people like thinking of us as in like a net promoter score when they first join us and when they sign up for the service or organization? How do they feel later on? Can we affect a transformative change? Is there a behavioral change? So those are some of the commonalities. Share of voice, I think, is really interesting because those communities are really just about being front of mind for people. And so, there are like some really nice third-party tools that you can use. You can word cloud, you can get lots of qualitative data. Those types of communities also tend to look at things like feedback, product feedback or platform feedback or customer feedback, testimonials. So I really like those types of communities and those KPIs too. Like I like the hardcore data ones, but I also like qualitative and the stories that come out of community. And so those are some familiar use cases, and those are also some familiar KPIs that I've worked with in the past. For example, at Meta, most of our programs that we ran, so I worked for Meta and we worked in a very meta way. We worked with community builders who were each building their own individual communities.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, a lot of our KPIs revolved around either the product feedback aspect, because my team
Okay.
worked very closely with the product development teams. And so we were taking that feedback, helping to shape a picture of how people were using certain features and products. I think the second thing was always a net promoter score type of aspect. We called it something different internally, it was measured differently, but essentially a measure of how do people feel about the company, the platform, the community building aspects of what they were using? And then combined with product feedback, that gave a really clear picture of how do people feel about us? What can we do better and what are we doing right? Right. So we got a really clear picture of start, stop, continue by measuring those KPIs.
Yep. Again, neatly put. So we also kind of talk about the building essentials that, so for example, someone decides to run a community, right? What are some of the essentials of building a community? What do you require? maybe if you can neatly put it, that'd be really helpful for the audience as well.
Yeah, I have a personal take on this. I mean, everybody has a lens on this, and so you can go and look and Google, and I'm sure Wylo has their own take on this in terms of
Yeah.
essentials and frameworks. The Avani framework is this. There's a really nice tool that I like. It's called the community canvas, and it is almost like a business canvas, like a lean startup methodology way of thinking about starting a community, tied to things like who's your audience, who's your goals. So you almost go through and think of it like a business exercise. I really like that tool because it forces you into the thinking mode of thinking, what's the evolution of this thing, and what do I have on hand, and what are the resources that I need? So I think some framework, there are n number of frameworks for thinking about how to start a community. Choose one that you like. One will speak to you. One you will like. Maybe you make your own on a Miro board. Do that. That's really important, just to do some of that pre-thinking. The second thing is, like I mentioned, is resources. You need somebody to run it. You need somebody to understand the data behind it. You need somebody to relieve the person that's running it, and you need an up chain. Who is the community builder, the person whose hands are in the community every day, or the team that's hands are in the community? Who are they talking to? Who are they reporting to? That whole team needs to be in place, and they need to understand the importance of it. You know, maybe it's just 3 people to start out with. Maybe it's just 1 person and a founder, but that whole team needs to be in place. So thinking about resourcing as not just the person running the community, as in a community manager or head of community, but thinking about it throughout the whole chain of your organization. And, you know, like, look at a Rossi, right? Who's responsible, accountable, all of that stuff is super nice, because then you understand how many hands are in the pie here, right? There's actually, we think of community as like 1 or 2 people being in the kitchen. Okay, that's the moderation team. But it actually, there's a lot of people that should be involved and should understand what they could get out of this. And the KPIs for each one of those reporting lines should be very clear. Okay, for you, I'm going to deliver like marketing insights. For the product teams and the head of product, I'm going to be delivering product insights. For our customer satisfaction team, I'm going to be delivering testimony. You know, whatever that is, you need to be really clear about that. So I think those are must-haves, the reporting lines and the KPIs that associate with both. I think thirdly, you need to be clear about when you're on and when you're not on. And it's really important to model to your members or your customers or whatever you call them that it's okay to be off. The worst thing that you can do is not plan to be off, not plan for downtime, not plan for when things are not working, and then you experience burnout at a company-wide level. Because when the person running the community gets tired, the community gets tired. Yeah. So planning ahead for that is like super important in thinking about what's the backup for this person, what's the backup for this function, when are we on and when are we off, and how do we clearly communicate that? I think lastly, these are super broad categories, so there will be tons of people on this podcast who will go into brass tacks, but I'm a 30,000 feet type of girl, so I'll just be giving you these things to think about, and then you can get down to the level that you need. I think lastly, what are the values in which we are running this community? What do we believe in? What is our voice? What will we not stand for? And what is acceptable and not acceptable here? Thinking through that is super important. Some things where I've seen this last part not thought through really well. I'll give you a very clear example. There is a brand that runs a community. I will not name them. And they are focusing on women's fitness. Broad category. Fitness, but specifically for women. They sell some merchandise associated with that. They have a pretty active community. I was speaking to them maybe about a year and a half ago. And in their community space, I just went in to take a look, like, hey, what are you guys doing? If you want to talk to me, let me see what you're doing. And what I noticed is that this is a brand that talks about accessibility. that fitness is for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are. It highlights the difference in experience of women in the world of fitness, but also in the world. That women are sometimes shut out of spaces, they feel like they're not given a voice. And it aims in their advertising and marketing to be superhuman, super connected, to tell the stories of women, to use real women in their ads, like women with all different types of body shapes and body sizes. In their community, their corporate account was answering queries. So what you would see is the logo of the corporate account, and you would just see them answering queries or posting or whatever. And the brand lost an opportunity to drive home all of the points and the values that it was trying to espouse. And namely, in one of the coolest things you can do is give your community a human face or human faces. Who's the team behind this? We are real humans. We work for this company. So, it's Om and it's Avani. They're the admins here. They're going to be talking to you. So while they were posting and signing off under their corporate account, they weren't giving their names. You didn't know who the human was that you were talking to. And I think that brand lost an opportunity to echo that value throughout the chain of experience of their customers and potential customers. Just giving you an example, thinking through that in terms of how are you gonna even protect your employees who are doing this work from exposure, right? That might take additional resourcing in terms of creating extra profiles for them, or even giving them an aggregate name. Maybe you don't have a real human. Now, I'm not saying that you should do this, but I've seen this being done. Maybe it's not Om and Avni, but maybe we create a composite person called Om Avni, or Avnom. And that is the face of the community. It could be AI generated, but there's a face. There's a voice associated with that profile. That profile posts like that all the time, answers like that all the time, it has a personality, it has thoughts, it has feelings. I think those are missed opportunities in terms of the way, especially brands and businesses think about running community. It's all very stiff. And hello, no younger generation wants to talk to a stiff ass brand. They're not going to buy from you. They're not going to be your customers because their values are different. So if you don't understand that long tail community experience game, and if you don't understand that it's all about, you need to understand what is the emotional transformation that somebody is trying to, they're either aspiring to by being a part of what you're building, or you're trying to get them to by being who you are. That lack of connection and forethought is damning to me. That means you don't understand what you're doing. So I would say, please think about that, because if you don't understand the transformation, if that's not front of mind, if you haven't given real thought to that, then wait, then it's not that important. But these are some of the resources that you need. Bring in a psychologist if you need to understand behavioral change and transformation. But you should always understand, what are you doing that makes people feel X, Y, or Z? Are you leaving people better than you found them? Are you resourcing the people behind the community well enough so that they're not burning out? And then are you putting enough thought into what you're tracking and the data behind it so you can actually see the change?
Right. I think as you rightly said, it's important even for a brand to kind of have a personality, right, attached to the community. It's very important as the community grows, right? Neatly put again. So we're kind of get into the next session of the episode, right? So what we'll do in this is kind of share a snippet. It's basically from your social media. We have taken a snippet. We're going to kind of show it to you. You tell us why you wrote that and what it is about, right? I'll share my screen.
I hope this isn't coming back to bite me in the ass.
No. It's a very interesting line that you had wrote. So I want to kind of share it over here. Yep. I hope you can see the screen.
I can see the screen.
Great.
Okay. This is another one of Avni's spicy takes. So my personal way of building communities is to lean startup the heck out of them. I launch. I launch and I pilot. I don't widely publicize, but I get a beta group in and I test and I test and I refine and I refine and I refine. I do some initial thinking, but I go in with a hypothesis first and I test the hypothesis or hypotheses, and then I fully launch. Sometimes that works better for me than going through like a whole community canvas, a community model canvas. And so for me, understanding that like this statement really, like community is a long game. You will continually be learning, refining, testing. And so sometimes when you are steadfast on one type of KPI, or you predetermine the transformation that I was talking about, you don't necessarily really allow or open yourself up to any other magic that could come from your community. Maybe your community is not well suited for customer acquisition, but it's better suited for retention. Like you end up finding through community that, okay, new people are not necessarily going to join this, but our old folks love coming in here as experts, and you find yourself with a panel of like really amazing, well-vested super users who want to go deeper with you, right? So that's why I think sometimes it's important just to not think about metrics and play. So that element of playfulness in terms of using the word scrimmage, the scrimmage is like a test match. So you're playing for fun, you're playing to learn technique, you're trying new things. Any good team is going to scrimmage, and they're going to scrimmage with each other sometimes. They're going to go head to head, they're going to compete, but it's not a real competition. That's so important sometimes when we're doing community, and I feel really strongly about that as a model for the way that I build a community. And it's not right for everyone. If you have limited resources and you don't have time to play, you need to figure out how much time do I have to play before this. But if you do have the time and the resources, monetary and otherwise, to do this, it's one of the best ways to build community, because as long as you learn quickly, if you're like too thick-headed and you're not able to understand and absorb the lessons, and you're not looking at this data, you're not playing around, then it's not good for you. So I think if you're the type of person that can enjoy a little bit of play and flexibility, and you're okay with falling on your face and being transparent about that, right? Transparency is a part of this strategy.
Right.
Hey, we're trying something new. You have to say that out loud. Then this is like a super, super amazing way to think about community building, and one that this is the way Avani builds. This is how I love to build community.
Very nice, very nice. I think it's all about the experimentation, right? And the iterations with respect to community building. I think that's very important to kind of have and reach to the point that we're always kind of thinking about. I think it's very important.
Absolutely.
We also
and I think I was just going to say about this, like, just to reiterate, that experimentation is important, and the transparency about the experimentation is important too.
Right. Yeah. I think transparency is one of the important factors in communities, right? They have to be very transparent. I think that is what people like and expect as well. Cool. We'll also kind of quickly move to the next section. It's kind of a rapid fire. Nothing related to communities.
Cool.
Rapid fire session with you.
I love it.
Are you a book person or a movie person?
Book.
Okay. Tell us about an underrated book that you have read and would recommend people to read it as well.
Okay, this is a very Bangalore answer, but I'm just going to say it. I read, like every startup person reads this book in Bangalore. If you go into any third wave, you'll see them reading it. But I recently read the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. That man is dropping some genius gems from his experience. And his brother has a book. His brother had a life-threatening disease, and so I'll recommend both books. The Almanac is really interesting just to think about your life and building. I think the second thing was his brother's book, Kamal Ravikant. It's very short. It's like, love yourself like your life depends on it. And he just talked about his experience of having like a life-threatening medical condition, and he healed himself by telling himself that he loved himself. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. I'd recommend both those books. Very, very cool books.
Great, nice recommendations. And which is your favorite community that you have been part of, that you have seen the community grow?
Yeah, I am a part of several, I mean, lots of different communities. Um, I, it's very hard for me to list just one because they all play a different purpose, and sometimes I go to them for different things. But I would say in the community space right now, there is a small group of us in a community founders group that you're also in,
Yeah.
where it's a really great community of practice and we all support each other. And so it's called Founders. I really love that space because it's all very senior level people there. And so sometimes community spaces have mixed levels of experience, which I like. But sometimes I need someone to go a little bit deep. So I like that community. And I think just for my soul, um, these are sort of ephemeral communities, but I have been on a learning journey. So I've been learning a lot about gender and international development and stuff. So I took a course by Unconform and Mansi Gupta called Designing for Women. And I think the community of that course, although it's not super active on WhatsApp, but when we were taking the class, having those other people in the course with me was such an incredible learning experience. And there were many practitioners, like people from NGOs, people from policy spaces, people who were just working professionals or students. It was such a wonderful way to get a orchestra of voices in the room and learn from their experience, even though I haven't done those things in my life. So I would also just say that course and sort of that voice has been really interesting. I want to just add as a third. Um, um, there is a wonderful design group out of Canada that is talking about relational design. Um, and the community around that and their workshops in LinkedIn has been really wonderful. They're turning this idea of human centered design on its head and basically saying, we have to think about the whole world, the planet, our ancestors, animals, plants, all of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff in nature when we think about design. And that community is blowing my mind in the way that they're thinking about building using this concept.
Yeah. Great, great, Avni. That was a good rapid fire session. I think before we end this session, right, I just want to ask you a final question. So, who from your circle do you think should we kind of bring them to the community deep dive episode, maybe one of our episodes?
Yeah, I think two people you need to call on, there's a few. Um, uh, One is Neha Agarwal. The other is Ritu Mittal. They are two very deep thinking community minds. They're like my community building friends. Ishita Maheshwari, Gautam Shivakumar, who are both from Head Start
Mm-hmm.
Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Head Start just wrapped up their event in Bangalore. They have such an incredible way of building on the ground communities of volunteers that I think that they're like a really, really good, really good example of like how to bring it in real life. So I would definitely say them. Um, there's tons more. I mean, Deepak from C3 does a lot of deep thinking on community, and
Mm-hmm.
I think he's
Mm-hmm.
like a really important voice. Globally, there's a lot of really wonderful voices, and I think there's some interesting things going on with some of our most well-known community organizations.
Right.
So, like Francisco from Led by Community is really thinking really deeply, and some of his team about some of the things that he'd like to build in the space. Like he wants to make an agency, so I think that's like an interesting model to think about. I also think like people like Carrie, Melissa Jones, if you can talk to them, like they have their own sets of frameworks because they're community
Mm-hmm.
consultants. Brie Lever, there's a ton of those people. I really enjoy Nikki Thibodeau and
Mm-hmm.
Max Pete. A lot of their stuff on LinkedIn really resonates with me. There's like a lot. There's like a lot of people, so I feel like I just list off. Um, there's a wonderful community practitioner that I love. Her name is Lana Jalenja, and she talks about healing centered communities. And so she thinks about how do we invoke a space? What are the cultural practices we need to put into
Mm-hmm.
this? How do we
Mm-hmm.
make sure that everyone's voice is heard? So I've actually learned a lot from her. So those are some of like the top voices that I can think of right now.
Definitely, thanks for all those names. I think we'll try our best to kind of bring them all to the community deep dive and kind of try and share more values to people, right? Thanks a lot,
Absolutely.
Avani.
And
Yeah.
like and oh, I'm sorry, I missed out on a bunch of people, but
Uh-huh.
all of my sort of former colleagues at Meta who are in the community building side, they're all wonderful. So I will give you a list of 30 people who I think you should interview because they all just have really interesting lenses and takes based on their experience.
Uh-huh.
And doing this at that meta level of being at Meta and thinking about working with community leaders. There's some really fabulous people, so I'd love to just give you a list of those guys too.
Yeah, definitely share the list. We're gonna kind of bring everyone.
Cool,
Great.
amazing.
Thanks, Avani. Thanks for your time for this wonderful session. I think we talked about a lot of things. Why run a community? Why not? And then we talked about the building essentials of communities. It was really a wonderful session. You shared a lot of values. Thank you for joining in for this episode.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And everyone, if you're listening, I'm accessible. I'm available. You can ping me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Threads. You can find my Instagram. Maybe you don't find my Instagram, but let me know how we can connect to talk more deeply. I get really energized by talking about this stuff. It keeps me up at night. I think about it in the shower. These are my shower thoughts. So let's carry on a conversation together. Let's be each other's community.
Great, great. I'll be dropping your socials along with this video and episode. Great. I think more people will get connected.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks a lot. My pleasure as well.